You know, it's one of those stories that feels like it should be common knowledge in American sports, but for so long, it just wasn't. I'm talking about the incredible dominance of black jockeys in the early days of horse racing.
It really is an amazing chapter. We're talking, what, 15 Kentucky Derby wins in the first 28 races?
Yeah.
By African-American riders.
Exactly. 15. It highlights this unbelievable level of skill and success, which, makes it even stranger that their story kind of faded from popular memory for a while.
Mm-hmm. Quite striking.
Absolutely. So today, that's what we're diving into, this really compelling history of black jockeys. We're drawing heavily from a great piece by David Kindy over on history.com called When Black Jockeys Dominated American Horse Racing.
A really informative article.
Yeah, it is. And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to really unpack how these African-American riders rose up, became these huge sports superstars, right?
Yeah.
And then try to understand the forces that seem to just push them out of the spotlight.
And importantly, how that legacy is now being rediscovered and brought back into focus.
Exactly. And you're going to hear some truly remarkable details today, things that really connect the dots. Okay, so let's paint the picture. The golden age. Think about this. May 17th, 1875. It's the very first Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
You've got like 10,000 people watching.
Mm-hmm.
And who wins? Oliver Lewis, a black jockey who had actually started life enslaved.
Riding Aristides.
Riding Aristides, yeah. And get this, the horse was trained by Ansel Williamson, also born into bondage.
It's incredible context for the very first Derby.
And that win wasn't just symbolic, right? Lewis set a speed record for the 1.5-mile race that actually stood for 3 whole years.
And looking bigger picture, that first race, it really set the stage. As you said, 13 of the 15 jockeys in that first ever Derby were black.
Yeah.
That alone is staggering.
It really is.
And then the stat you mentioned earlier bears repeating. African-American riders won 15 of the first 28 Kentucky Derbies.
Yeah.
Well, it's more than half. Total dominance.
So, okay, the obvious question then is how? How did this happen? Where did this level of expertise, this mastery of horses come from?
Right. You have to look back before the Civil War. Horse racing then was mostly a Southern thing, deeply tied up with the whole plantation economy.
Okay.
And enslaved laborers were absolutely central to that economy. So naturally, they were the ones tasked with, well, everything to do with the horses, caring for them day in, day out.
So it wasn't just basic stable work. They were developing real skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Intimate, hands-on knowledge. They were the stable hands, sure, but also the groomers, the exercise riders. They understood the animals. It was a natural progression for many to become jockeys and trainers. They were effectively the first American horsemen.
Makes sense.
Then, after the Civil War, you see thoroughbred racing really explode across the country. New tracks opening up, including in the North, and these highly skilled African-American horsemen, many bringing that deep experience from the South, they just built on that foundation. And, well, they quickly became the best in the game.
And it wasn't just being the best, it was reaching genuine superstar status. And for that era, frankly, unbelievable wealth. Let's talk about Isaac Murphy for a second.
Oh, yeah. A legend.
Born into slavery, 1861, starts racing when he's just 14 years old, weighing like 70 pounds. Tiny guy.
Yeah?
But the thing that just blows my mind, reading about him, is that he became the highest paid athlete of his day. Period.
He did. The reports say he earned as much as $20,000 a year. Now you got to translate that. $20,000 back then is like almost $700,000 today.
Wow.
For an athlete, let alone a black athlete in the late 19th century. It's almost unimaginable.
And his performance backed it up. His win rate was reportedly something like 44%.
Yeah, 44%. And Chris Goodlett from the Kentucky Derby Museum points out that, the very best jockeys today, they maybe win around 25% of their races. So Murphy was just operating on another level.
It's hard to even process that level of consistent winning. And okay, maybe 19th century records aren't always perfect, but his impact is undeniable, right? He was the first jockey of any race elected to the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame when it opened in 1955.
That's huge.
And the historian Catherine Mooney called him one of the first black superstar athletes. That's a major historical label.
Absolutely.
And Murphy wasn't alone. There was Willie Sims, another giant of that era. He's the guy credited with popularizing the short stirrup riding style that, jockeys still use.
Right, that very influential style.
Yeah.
And Sims also earned a fortune, reported $10,500 in 1895 alone. That's around $400,000 in today's money.
Incredible.
And Sims has some unique milestones, too. He's the only African-American rider ever to win all 3 Triple Crown races. The Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont.
The only one, still.
Still the only one.
Yeah.
And he was also the first American jockey to win a race in England riding an American horse, a pioneer on multiple fronts.
And it wasn't just the jockeys achieving this level of success rate. The article mentions black trainers who were also incredibly influential.
Oh, definitely. You had Dudley Allen, also born enslaved, became one of the top 2 trainers at Churchill Downs. And get this, he was the only African-American to actually own a Kentucky Derby winning horse, Kingman, back in 1891.
He owned the horse. Wow.
Yep. And then there's Edward Dudley Brown. He was actually auctioned as a boy while enslaved, went on to train 3 Derby winners, Baden in 77, Ben Brush in 96, and Plotted in 98.
3 winners.
These weren't just skilled professionals, they were true pioneers, breaking down barriers, achieving success that just defied the intense racial limitations of that whole era.
Okay, so you paint this picture of this incredible golden age. Dominant jockeys, leading trainers, real wealth, superstardom. So what happened? Because, I mean, you look at horse racing today, and that level of black participation, especially among jockeys, it's just not there.
Yeah, this is where the story takes a really sharp and pretty grim turn. Early 20th century, that whole amazing era just comes crashing down.
Why? What shifted?
Well, you have the rise of Jim Crow segregation laws spreading like wildfire, particularly in the South, but impacting the whole country. These laws enforce racial separation, discrimination in every part of life.
Right.
And on the track, this combined with intense pressure and often outright violence from white jockeys who wanted them out. They systematically started forcing African-American riders out of the spotlight, out of the big races.
The article mentioned some really specific, brutal stuff, like white riders using their riding crops to whip black jockeys during races, or deliberately forcing them into the rails. Dangerous tactics.
Exactly. And Joe Drape, who wrote a book about Jimmy Wingfield, he put it bluntly. Every day, a black rider ended up in the dirt. And every day, racing officials looked the other way.
They just looked the other way, allowed it to happen.
That's what the accounts suggest. A complete lack of enforcement when it came to protecting black riders. It creates this picture of intense hostility.
Was it purely racism, or were there other factors driving this exclusion?
Well, the racism was obviously foundational, but there was a clear economic motive, too. See, early on, racetracks made money mostly from tickets, concessions, that kind of thing. But then betting, the money from wagering, became the dominant income stream. Huge amounts of money started flowing through betting.
Ah, okay. Follow the money.
Precisely. White jockeys saw this massive new pot of money, the purses, the bonuses tied to betting, and they wanted a bigger slice, or maybe all of it. And the Jim Crow atmosphere gave them the leverage, the systemic backing, essentially, to push the black jockeys out and grab that wealth.
So Jim Crow provided the framework, and the economic incentive provided the motivation.
That seems to be the dynamic, yeah. And the result was stark. Jimmy Wingfield's Kentucky Derby win in 1902. That was the last one by an African-American jockey for over a century.
The last one, wow, just like that, the pipeline shuts down.
Pretty much.
So what happened to these incredibly skilled horsemen, these superstars? Did they just disappear?
It's heartbreaking, really. They were largely sidelined, pushed into the background. Many black horsemen ended up in, well, more menial jobs around the track. Muckers, the folks cleaning manure from the stalls. Exercise riders, track rakers. Important jobs, sure, but a far cry from the winner's circle.
A huge step down from being the highest paid athletes.
Absolutely. But it's important to note, even in those tougher circumstances, some still held incredibly vital, though often invisible, roles. Their expertise was still needed.
Like who?
Well, think about the grooms. The people responsible for the day-to-day care of these million-dollar thoroughbreds. You had figures like Will Harbut. He was the dedicated groom for the legendary Man o' War for years. Or Eddie Sweat, who groomed Secretariat, maybe the most famous horse of all time.
Right, Secretariat's groom. I remember hearing about him.
Their deep knowledge, their connection with the horses was indispensable. It shows that black horsemen continued to make these crucial contributions, even when they weren't the ones getting the headlines at the trophies anymore. Their skill endured.
Was there any kind of return later on? Did any black jockeys break through again in the later 20th century?
There were glimmers. The article mentions James Long, who started racing in 1974. He was one of the few black jockeys during that period and managed to win over 300 races in his career. So not a complete absence, but certainly nothing like that earlier golden age.
A tough road back, clearly.
Very tough. But thankfully, there are now real efforts to preserve and, importantly, celebrate this history. The Kentucky Derby Museum, for example, has its Black Heritage in Racing exhibit.
That's good to hear.
And there are organizations like the Ed Brown Society, named after Edward Dudley Brown, the trainer we mentioned earlier, who was born enslaved and trained 3 Derby winners. Their whole mission is to honor this legacy and create opportunities.
So bringing the history back into the light.
Exactly. And Chris Goodlett, the museum historian, has this hopeful perspective. He acknowledges their dominance was basically erased by Jim Crow, but he says, over the last few decades, we're seeing their return, not just as jockeys and trainers, but in all facets of the industry.
Oh, interesting. So beyond riding and training,
including track management, stable ownership, and more. He feels like it's maybe slowly starting to come full circle.
That's a more optimistic note to end on. So let's try to wrap this up. What's the big takeaway here from this deep dive? We've traced this incredible rise to superstardom.
Followed by a really tragic decline driven by systemic racism and violence.
Right. And now these ongoing, maybe hopeful efforts to finally acknowledge and celebrate this huge, but for so long overlooked part of American sports history.
I think for me, the story is just such a powerful lens on these bigger patterns in society.
Yeah.
You know, opportunity, then exclusion, but also resilience.
Yeah.
It's a really stark reminder of how even like unparalleled excellence can be suppressed when powerful forces, economic, social, line up against a group, and how history itself can be shaped or maybe hidden by prejudice.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? This whole deep dive leaves me wondering how many other stories like this are out there. Stories of incredible achievement and then systemic exclusion, just hidden in plain sight in American history, waiting for us to finally pay attention and uncover them.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What else don't we know?